Hi, I'm Sam from the Blueprint Global Talent Consultancy, and we are in conversation with a formidable game changer today, Fura Jóhannesdóttir. Have I got that right?
Congratulations.
And Fura is basically one of the most formidable global chief design officers in our industry. Starting her career at RGA, she's worked with Nike, she formed Nike ID, she's been at Publicis Sapient, and now she's Global Chief Design Officer of Huge. Welcome, Fura.
Thank you.
Let's begin by kind of talking about how did you get into the career that you're in?
It's quite a journey.
Right. I can only imagine with you it's quite a journey.
So it was actually really interesting because I have always been very interested in creativity.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to become was an architect.
Yeah.
But I missed the deadline for the school.
Right.
So I ended up in psychology.
Right. I didn't know you'd done psychology.
Yeah.
Wow.
Undergraduate in psychology.
Okay.
And when I graduated, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Decided to finish it. And then I applied to a job in the ad industry.
Had you been in design? Were you a creative designer?
Yeah, I was just more drawing and like doing art.
Yeah.
And then I decided that, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. So I applied for a job in the publishing department. And the guy asked, hey, are you interested in publishing at all? And I said, no, I'm not. I want to be a creative. I didn't get the job.
Right.
But they did hire me for a sister agency that was a web agency.
Right.
And that's how the whole thing started. It was really interesting. Okay. It just happened by chance.
And was this in Iceland? Or
it was in Iceland.
It was in Iceland, okay.
Yeah.
And they were progressive anyway. All Scandi countries seem to have been super progressive at that time in digital and... Yeah.
Exactly. So we were like, the first agency, like one of the first ones that was doing digital.
Right.
Working with the biggest clients in the country.
Right.
And literally just 10 people back then.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting, you know? We were just trying to figure it out, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Just the test and experiment kind of mentality that like all that world's kind of been.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when did you feel like you got your first break? You know, that eureka moment where you're like, oh my God, I'm in an environment where I know I can change the game.
That's a good question. I think I didn't realize it when it was happening.
Right.
It's kind of a funny story because I did go to New York to study design. Finally.
Parsons.
Yeah,
right.
and did a master's degree.
Just that old master's degree from Parsons.
Yeah, it was fine. It was fun. It was fun. It's probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done.
Of course.
Just to go in and just they break you down and they rebuild you.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't realize when I actually did get a job at RGA that it was going to be a defining moment for me.
Right.
Because I was going into a digital agency in New York. Yeah. It was famous for being the sweatshop. Yeah. I was like, oh man, I kind of don't want to go in there. Yeah. I had friends working there and I knew it was going to be hard. Yeah. But little did I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you think your background, like coming from Iceland, working at a most kind of at the time, I guess, one of the most progressive kind of new, the digital was like the new thing. Do you think that enabled you to just see things differently and challenge status quo?
Yeah, I think when we were doing digital back in the beginning, everything was new. Yeah. And it was really about, honestly, like when I was at RGA, I felt like we were actually like creating the business or defining the business. Yeah. And really just trying to figure out how to use digital and how it would play a role in people's lives. So that was really like, innovation was just a demand, and just being constantly pushing into the next was a requirement to succeed in that business.
Of course.
And specifically working with a very savvy client like Nike, you had to be like just constantly
one step ahead.
A step ahead, or at least try. Very smart clients, you would have to try. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because we've had our career parallels are quite similar. As in, I was at Wydens when you were at RGA. I was doing Run London, and then you come along and did Nike Plus. Yeah. But that's a really defining kind of moment for me, I think, in my career, when I used to see digital agencies and think, we've got the cards. We're the main kind of client's main agency. And then you guys come along and sort of invented something, a product that was so synonymous with Nike's attitude and kind of like their understanding of their consumer and their behaviour. And it's just one of those moments where you're like, wow, I wish I did that. In your career then at RGA or at Publicis or at Huge, what have been your most career game-changing defining moments, would you say?
I think probably just in the beginning. When I started at RGA, like one of my first projects was a very simple, sounds very simple today, it wasn't simple back then. It was an interactive music video with Rihanna.
Oh, I remember this.
Where you were able to shot the video and do all of those things. And it was very playful, like, and it was just like tech creatives, designers, really trying to figure out how we were actually going to make it happen. I think that was the moment when I personally realized that everything was possible. So, like, I think that would be like, particularly that moment. And I think then later in my career, when I started to work a little bit more, kind of trying to get the intersection between digital and physical a little bit more. When we started to push Nike ID into retail space in new ways, and really think the role of retail in a digital world, and you know, and think omni and all of that. That's when the pieces really started to come together, and you're like, oh wow, man, like everything is just getting infused, and kids today don't see a difference between digital and physical, and there is no wall. It's just like it's the world. And I think, you know, when you start kind of realizing that the walls are breaking down, and it just needs to be much more holistic in terms of how you think about brands,
of course,
and brand expression.
4 dimensions. It's kind of across everything.
I think that was another kind of moment where it's like, oh, okay, this is still really interesting, right? It's so easy to get bored, but you're like,
well, it's so easy to fall into the same formula.
Exactly.
Okay, we did this for ID, so therefore we'll do this for this client.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the kind of, I mean, it's an interesting question actually. You know, there is a lot of status quo, I think, in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you know, what is that status quo for you actually, and who is pushing the boundaries?
I think there's a lot of status quos. I think one of the things we're guilty of is just pleasing the clients. I think that's the first trap we can kind of get into.
We both know, coming from RGA and Wygants, you don't please the client.
No, you have to challenge, you have to push boundaries. I think the other thing that I have been obsessing about for the past couple of years is the status of design in our industry, and creativity, and I'm really worried. I mean, like, I look around and I just, you gotta think, why are all the airline applications, why do they look the same and do the same, and all the banks, and like, why is everybody replicating what the other person is doing and trying to reinvent? I think that is like, that status quo to me, and that is something that I'm like, if we're not gonna break out of that, design becomes really irrelevant. Like, we need to use our tools to push things forwards, but not stay like just where we are. You know, and I think that's the role of design. You know, we're designing the world. You know, so why would it always look and feel the same?
It's an interesting point actually, isn't it? I mean, I think if I see so much of design, it still feels quite two-dimensional. Even though, you know, and I know you are the queen of kind of engaging and delivering a brand's voice and its experience across every form of narrative that there is. I mean, the one thing that I would say, having worked with you, what defines you as a game changer to me is your understanding of the real business problem and the consumer behaviour. You know, you're at the intersection of those worlds, and then obviously the other intersection is the brand that you're driving and ensuring has that genuine reason to exist and to turn up and to talk to them and make them feel something. You know, that for me is kind of what makes you a genuine game changer, because each brand is different to you. Each problem is different, but you really do understand that. Do you work with people, when you see other game changers around you, what attributes or sort of character is that, what do you gravitate towards them? Like, can you talk about that a bit?
I think when people are hungry, you know, it's the hunger, it's the way they think, you know. And it can't be a person at any level. Like, I have hired really junior talent that didn't really have any craft, but they have the energy.
Yeah.
And it's something about the energy and like feeling where people want to go and that they want to be innovators and they want to change the world and that they can do it and they actually believe they can.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
that
those
curiosity,
exactly.
like keep pushing. Yeah.
Just keep pushing and being a little restless.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I also think more recently, I think it's also just about understanding the responsibility that we have in the world and being really thoughtful around what you do. But there is so much innovation space around equality, sustainability, like how are we going to push brands into becoming better? Just better in general. So to me, that's a really interesting space right now. How do you actually, because you talked about it, you talk about what you were actually talking about is between brands and people and how you kind of, business and people. That's where you find the value, right?
Absolutely.
But you also have to align on values to be relevant. So like, I think there's just a ton of space in that. But those are the people that I'm drawn to, the people who think that way. Like very holistic thinking.
When we talk about the industry at large, I mean, this is a big, lofty question. And you probably are in charge of the creative industry, but if you were in charge of the creative industry, what would you do in the future?
What would I do in the future? Well, rethink everything. Like that it's a big task. But if you want to talk about the agency world in particular, like we have to change. I think we need to define our roles. And like, I think we need to be fire starters for brands and being the people who are going to help them see above it all. Because like if you're working in a company and you're kind of caught in your day-to-day business, that's where your mind is. And I think we need to play the role of pulling them out of that mindset. And if we're going to just by diving into that hole and stay there with them, how are we going to make change?
We're going to borrow.
Exactly. It's just like, then there is no role for us. So I think we need to really think about, okay, what are we here to do? And this is the reason I stay within agencies is because I'm curious and I like to work on different types of business problems. And be that person that can start things off, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I want to be in the long game and actually executing the whole thing. And I think we need to be more comfortable with that as an industry. It's like we're going to be doing that. But then they are going to use their internal staff to kind of bring things to life.
Of course. You know. You mean talking about the in-housing, kind of where do you stop and they start?
Exactly.
And I mean, in terms of the sort of, and this isn't by any stretch like the final question, but do you think there's kind of bravery in clients? Do you think we still have game-changing clients out there?
Oh, I think we definitely do. I mean, there are just brands that I adore, like Patagonia. But it's actually kind of, it's in the purpose of the company. You know, and I absolutely, there are game changers. There are game changers within the clients. There are clients that we have that I know are going to be able to push things forward. But I also think they need partners like us to be able to do it and help them and work with them to figure it out and what they need to do. But I don't think, personally, I think in today's landscape, it's more risk not to take risk. And this is the thing when I'm working with clients who are playing it safe, I'm like, that's a slow death.
That's a lovely way of putting it. It is a lovely way of putting it. I mean, we talk a lot about being born children of like the RGAs, like Bob's RGAs or Dan's Widens, you know. We're born to be brave and to be progressive and constantly push forward and innovate, you know, and step outside of the norm. Like, what advice would you give to anyone who wants to be a game changer coming into this industry or in the industry but might not necessarily be in your position right now? What advice would you give them?
I think the first advice is just to embrace it and not try to please everybody else. You know, I think if you have a strong belief, just go for it. You know, I think people need to jump more often. And if you feel that hunger that you need to jump, just please do. I mean, I think that's how you make your career and your life happen, is by taking a little bit of risk.
Defining your own voice.
Yeah, exactly. And speak up. I think that's one of the things. It doesn't matter what level you are. Just speak up and express your thinking and your ideas. And if you feel like you're being held back, get out. And I think that's the thing. It's like I stayed with RGA forever.
Same.
Because it was just opportunities was just kept happening, and you felt like you were constantly learning, and that leadership was always redefining, and you were just thrilled by it, right? I think you need to figure out what kind of places are going to allow that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Find the right environment and thrive. Well, Fura, you are certainly one of the fire starters and always will be in our industry. I'd really like to thank you for everything that you've given today, and your advice and your insights and your wisdom. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.